Welcome to Storyboards. Theme music. I love the theme music. I know I said that last time, but I just love it.
Whoa, deja vu.
Deja vu all over again.
Deja vu?
Yeah, deja vu. Welcome back to Storyboards.
We're excited to have you again.
Again. And your ears listening to our voices.
Thank you, ears, for listening to our voices.
And eardrums for picking up the sounds and sending the signals to your brain.
Thank you, nerves, for sending those signals.
It's a great, great thing that you do for the body. Guess that's a shout out for the human body.
Shout out for you, human body.
So, today on Storyboards, we're going to go back.
To the future.
Yes, actually.
With me, Doc Brown. Zach Brown.
He doesn't have a PhD or anything. He's not a doctor.
No.
But we are going to Eternity Found again.
Yeah, who needs a regular transition? We're just going to do weird breathing techniques.
Yeah, right? Last time on Eternity Found, we discussed about a little thing called Avalon Industries.
Avalon Industries.
Within that, we also discussed the solar trade.
The solar trade.
And a little bit about the Court of Constellations.
And the Court of Constellations. You have to do a good announcer voice. If you're gonna go through things again, you have to do a good announcer voice.
Oh, okay. Make it interesting for people.
Yeah.
I see.
People don't want boring voices talking at them.
No boring voices, please. So, today we're going to discuss a little bit more about the Avalon Industries. Last time we discussed a little bit about the origin of it, how it came to join the Court of the Constellations, that it was more of a policing force that added to the court's defending powers. The court was very picky and choosy and only selected a few individuals that had the qualifications necessary to be the best guardians of the constellations.
Thank you for not saying galaxy.
Yeah. Avalon Industries worked to train people instead of just finding qualified individuals, and garnered a larger group than what the Court of Constellations could gather themselves because of their strict rules and regulations. And they offered their powers and forces to the court for pretty much full support for funding and everything they needed to continue the foundation itself.
And they did that through a very elaborate scheme, plan, if you will, that we talked about last time. So really, if you're going into this episode and you haven't listened to the last one that we did, you sort of need to. It's got background knowledge that is essential.
Mm-hmm. And if you're going to look for it, it's episode 3 of the Storyboards podcast. Maybe we should title them.
We probably should title them.
So people can find topics a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think like Revenge of the Sith for episode 3.
Yeah. Maybe Return of the Jedi?
No, maybe that should be our 6th one.
Oh, okay, maybe a New Hope.
You know what? Let's call my next podcast A New Hope. Like the next one that'll come out, number 4.
Oh, okay.
Or
So, go back, take a listen to the solar trade story. that will give you as Zach said, the intro and everything you'll need to know to be caught up on the story to this point. Now, today we're going to discuss more of the internal workings of Avalon Industries itself.
We're going to talk about their janitorial staff.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about their in-house kitchen.
Oh, yeah, that's a good part.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that
Great
chef,
food.
fantastic.
But yeah.
The space sludge.
In fact, you know, the crossovers between the two stories here, we've got chef and chef.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the ancestor of chef. No,
they're actually the same person.
Oh, the same
he's a
person?
dimension hopper.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. No.
He's going to appear in every single one of our stories.
No, they're not the same universe. They're separate. But that would be funny, though.
They're the same.
It would be fun, though.
It would be fun, though.
So, today we're going to discuss some notable people within Eternity Found, yes, but Avalon Industries. You got to meet last time Dowie O'Reilly.
You also got to meet some of our main characters.
A few individuals you'll know by the names of Leo, Palverian, and Christia.
Today we're going to introduce to you one of the funnest names to say in the universe. Toddley Ronturn.
Toddley
Just
Ronturn.
try it.
Toddley Ronturn.
It's enjoyable.
Toddley Ronturn.
Okay, you can stop trying it now.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, you better be.
Dowie O'Reilly started Avalon Industries in the sheer hopes to help the Court of Constellations. He saw how abundant crime was and how lacking the Court of the Constellations was in their defense department. And so he knew that he could take his abundant wealth, afford and train multiple individuals, thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people.
Especially as the company goes on, it goes into millions.
Yeah, to defend their own universe. And he offered it to the court because he knew that the court is a little too divisive to really decide things for themselves. I don't want to get too political in here, but I feel like any congregation or group of leaders that come together, kind of too many chefs in a kitchen kind of a thing, if we had too many people, they just couldn't get anything done.
I mean, that's true in any social situation. If you get a group of people together, it doesn't matter how similar the interests, there's always going to be a disagreement. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be something that one person likes and the other person doesn't. Like, take you and me, for example. I like turn-based strategy games and hate like the big beat-em-up Dynasty Warrior types.
And I love beat-em-up games. Action RPGs. I love those games.
And hate the turn-based strategy games.
Yeah, there's a few I do enjoy, but it's the classic click your selection of move and watch it happen. Yeah.
This is on our other podcast. Jameson and Zach argue about game types.
Anyways, so what you knew, if you listened to the story last time, which we highly recommend, episode 3, go and listen. They knew the court would take too long deliberating on solutions to their current dilemmas, and so they took action to show the court how good they were, or how effective they could be, and fairly prove themselves.
Yeah, long story short, the court is like, okay, yeah, we need you guys. And okay, yeah, you can be our primary law enforcement throughout the whole constellations.
Mm-hmm. Now, Dowie O'Reilly, he wanted to tread the line between mercenary organization and a policing organization because he knew that if they took out any offer to do any kind of act of protection or violence, they would become mercenaries. So he limited it to dignitaries, organizations, people that had a cause that he could agree with, kind of a thing, for protecting people, not just individual belongings or personal vendettas or anything. So it came to planetary protection from general crime. So that way he can differentiate.
Aha, I'm General Crime.
I'm General Crime. No.
Not a character.
Not a character. Hashtag not a character.
Hashtag should be a character.
Hashtag should. I am General Crime. He was able to get people such as Leo Palverian and Christia onto Avalon Industries, which they themselves joined Avalon when they were very young, and they were trained and grew up basically in the industry.
So, like, what types of training goes on in Avalon? So we know there's the combat training. We know that there's, in that combat training, there's obviously how to shoot a gun really, really well, how not to be a stormtrooper. What else goes on with this? Is there there law training? Is there...
Yeah, so they have officers of different types. They keep a roundabout education because they are taking people pretty young and raising them almost like a military academy. And they do have courses of sciences. They do have courses of learning nature of each individual planet and academic classes, things like that. They do have those, along with the customary combat courses, like he said, guns and laser guns, but also
gun lasers,
laser
swords.
No laser swords, but they did learn close combat as well, and eventually some of those individuals would grow up and become educators within the foundation itself, or the industry foundation, whatever. It's two different words to kind of describe this one thing, the company, because they are a foundation, because they don't get just a flat-out funding. They do get donations from those that they protect. They ask for it. They can be given it voluntarily. They don't ever force people to pay them, but...
You pay me.
Because, the owner of the company is one of the richest people in the galaxy. So he can afford a lot of it, but he does need help every now and then for certain things like technology and the so and such,
So with this company, as they go along and as they have this massive training and as they are now completely given free rein by the Court of Constellations to protect the law, to uphold it, they do so for the rest of the story, basically. They are always there, but motivations sometimes change. And that is the case with Avalon as a whole.
Now, you have to understand that there are linchpins to the morality of the company. Some of the people within the company, you don't just have pure good people. There are people of all different alignments, I guess. D&D
Hello,
talk.
I'm lawful good.
Of all different moral compasses. They do have morale officers and moral, education, things like that. But of course, you're always going to have individuals who believe differently or think differently. And so the linchpin of the company's moral compass is basically Dowie O'Reilly and the few individuals he selects to run the company with him. So if you take that out, the company's target, the company's morals can change. They can go in a completely opposite direction. And so this is one of the cases we see, because eventually, spoilers, not really spoilers, it happens before the story, Dowie O'Reilly is murdered.
Murdered.
Oh
no! By Norman Bates?
No.
I thought he was just a motel owner.
Yes, in the future.
In space.
It puts the skin on the lotion. I said that backwards.
Yeah, that was... it puts the skin on the lotion.
Just for copyright.
Red rum. Red rum.
Rum red. Rum red.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
See, that's more of a telling than than saying red rum. It's rum's red.
Rum's red.
Rum's red. All right.
So Dowie gets murdered. And with Dowie, as we were talking about that linchpin, the company goes in a complete different direction. They still are they uphold the law of the constellations, but things start to get a little bit odd.
Yeah, the new leadership that you'll come to meet, I'll leave that kind of a history of that for you to learn in the stories. The individual who takes over, he changes the moral compass and pushes it more to the mercenary side, while keeping the same strategies and business strategy, basically, of Avalon Industry, where they work as protectors, but since they work within the Court of the Constellations laws, they can also set laws of their own. Because if a planet was to purchase them, he changed it from a donation or, a optable monetary donation. He changed it to a flat out, if you pay us, we'll protect you. And this is how we'll protect you. We'll make sure that your planet follows the rules, but also to the most strict sense that we can possibly do. Meaning, we'll take away currency that causes war and theft and all these different things, and give you food vouchers so people work to earn their food instead of money to purchase things. They'll be provided with what they need. The higher or the bigger job that they do, the more important job they do, the more things they're given. And they're taken away from their jobs and given basically assignments to do for themselves based on their skills. So it is a ladder that people can climb. They don't see it as a complete evil thing, because you can get training for better assignments, better pay, and better items, but not everybody gets those.
And with that as well, they also sort of take people from those planets. They say, okay, yeah, part of your payment is we need X amount of people to come join us.
Yeah, there are planets out there that don't have great currency value, They don't have whatever monetary item the Court of Constellations needs for the expenditure of this new Avalon Industries. So therefore, they're like, okay, donate people to become soldiers.
And this causes a lot of uproar in the planets that the people are donated from, because those people, a lot of them don't really have a say in whether they're going or not. And so that could be, hey, you with the 5 kids, sorry, your kids are going to have to fend for themselves now because you're going. It just becomes such a horrible, horrible thing.
Mm-hmm. It's really difficult for the universe, but at the same time, they're being protected. They're having more peace than there was before, but at the same time, crime's just taken a different face. Now, certain characters that are noted in the last story have different reactions to the changes in the company. Leo, Palverin, and Christia all take different courses because in their stories they were closer to Dowie O'Reilly than most other people. But there's also one thing to note before the change of ownership. There was one thing that put Avalon Industries above any other protection agency or police force.
So everybody in the universe at this time, with access to the same amount of training that Avalon Industries could have, could be on the same level as Avalon Industries. If they had that same training, they'd do just as good a job. But due to some research that comes up and is discovered by Mr. Toddley, Ron Turn, a new project arises called the Extos.
Now, the Extos, they are an experiment that creates individuals with abilities above and beyond that of any regular humanoid creature. It's kind of a superhero twist on the story, but not, tights and not what you'd think of regular comic book superheroes. This is more of a powered individual that was grown in a laboratory and created for this purpose. This is a project that Dowie and Todd Lee Ronturn started conjointly, basically. And with this new information brought, they were able to create a power, a force that was unmatched in the entire galaxy.
This has a lot of different applications. It manifests differently in each exto, each person, from like enhanced strength to enhanced speed to enhanced reflexes to even more fantastical things.
Now, Todd Lee's original research into this and the things he discovered, he imagined it would be just a cloning experiment, things that created protectors instead of forcing people or taking people from other places to be protectors. They would make them, but due to the things he was given, the information that he had, it caused these people to have these powers and become better than most of the people that were in the industry itself. Now, we're going to kind of cut it off there because the Extos are a very important part of the story. There's some characters that are integral to the story that are Extos and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And they're reoccurring characters. Most of them are given names that are more
serial numbers,
but most of them without numbers, like serial letters, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Like DX.
DX. But some notable characters that you'll meet in the future are Q-UR or XAX. And they'll give themselves nicknames like Kur or Zax.
And I think it is notable to tell the listeners, our loyal listeners, that the Extos have one massive weakness to them.
This weakness is the fact that in order for them to survive, when Todd Lee was making this experiment to clone people, he found that without a previous DNA strand and both biological parents, the individual being grown wasn't stable. Its molecular structure would deteriorate over time. And so these clones wouldn't last. And so they decided to start testing with different energies or resources that could bind and stabilize the DNA sequence. And this allowed for the bodies to grow and mature, but then they would still deteriorate. They found that the greatest element that allowed for this bonding and a more solid growing pattern
was the element of surprise.
Oh,
I feel great.
Oh, I'm better. No. Was the mysterious element of plasma, a element that's just abound in space. Space has a slight reading of a plasmic charge in some portions, in eddies and different parts of the galaxy. And they found that using this mysterious portion of plasma in a charge that they've been able to contain, they were able to stabilize the body until they were fully mature. Then the body's charge of plasma would start to dissipate. So they discovered a way to recharge the bodies with this plasma. So each individual that they created,
they put positive to positive and negative to ground.
Each individual that they created would go on missions and have to return to charge, or they would suffer deterioration.
Yep. And so the Extos, although super powerful, have that one cool weakness. I think it's just awesome that they're not unbeatable.
They're not unbeatable. You can wait them out. I mean, you have a guy sitting there throwing fire at you from his hands, or a guy that lifts mountains, but then suddenly shrivels up because he doesn't have enough charge.
Just like Voldemort at the station at the end. What's that? It's a gross little baby thing.
Yes.
You were so scary before. What happened?
What happened to you? Yeah. Now, I use terms that are more Italian or not Italian, Latin phrases, Latin words. No, that's racist. Nationalist. No.
It's funny.
It can't be racist. It's just a country. I know. So keep in mind, Extos, Avalon Industries, superpowered individuals. Now, the story you're about to hear is part of the origin of the Extos, and more about Toddley Ronturn and one other notable individual that I'm pretty sure you'll be able to guess who he is for the story.
I mean, he doesn't play a notable part in the story at all.
No, not at all. So Toddley Ronturn and one mystery person you'll get to know.
And so that brings us to the best part of the podcast, the story itself. Once again, if you're not familiar with this, this is where we go and we have the author of the story read part of it to you. This week, as Jameson said, we are going to be talking. He's going to read a little bit about Toddley Ronturn to you, and that is, in fact, the name of this chapter, this story, this novella, this small portion of the history of Eternity Found. Toddley Ronturn.
Toddley Ronturn has seen his fair share of tombs and caverns of many species and kinds throughout the constellations. He's visited planets that still hold castles and knights, to worlds of flying cars and teleportation platforms. This world was different, strange in the way it moved, almost like everything was underwater, with the way the plants all waved back and forth. He treated everything here as something unique and precious, being careful not to step on any creature that may have some effect on the natural order. The men that were with him, however, weren't as careful. The regular expeditions that he was hired for normally involved going incognito on his own and studying advancing societies on pre-spacebound worlds. This expedition was his dream, the one he worked his whole life to afford. A journey beyond known space to worlds deep in the star-filled darkness. Due to the extreme danger that this mission held, he had to work to afford the defenses needed to make the study worth the journey. Through his connections, he was able to hire some men from the Avalon Industries Foundation for a reduced cost. Dowie O'Reilly, the man who began the foundation, was a close friend during their college years. These soldiers, donning similar garbs to that of the courtmen of the constellations, with their black suits emblazoned with stars and moons, were the most trustworthy defenders in all of the constellations. They weren't tied to the galactic law of the court, but they helped enforce it. They were also good for missions of delicate procedures with foreign species. They've been trained to speak first before pulling triggers. They weren't terrified by unknown alien species, and knew that peace wins out violence in most every case. In fact, if Toddley had something to give to Avalon to help in its mission, he would go to work with them full time. Excitement caused Toddley's chest to heave as his feet met the ground of the new planet. He stepped through the tall, waving weeds and plants, eyeing each and every moving object in a manner of study and intent. The bulky equipment swinging from his belt and hanging off of his shoulders didn't provide a way for him to be stealthy, but for some reason he felt that this planet wasn't shy. Every animal he discovered wasn't frightened, but curious at the entourage traipsing through the thick, vine-filled jungle. He caught a glimpse of a swine-like creature wading through a patch of thick weeds. This species had antlers and paw-like feet, making it a unique classification, even without considering its bright colorizations and skin-to-fur patterns. Toddley quickly wrote down his observations within his notebook as the men behind him walked around doing the studies of their own. All their weapons secured to their belts, not being switched from their safety settings. This planet felt kind in every facet of its nature. The plants almost moved to greet each of them in slow motions, and the animals would come to familiarize with each of them. Even the swine walked closer without any sign of fear, and as Toddley stuck out his hand to it, it came to meet him with its nose. "Is it wise to linger so close to the creatures, Mr. Ramturn?" said a young lieutenant standing at a distance away from any of the animals or interacting plants. He was tall, slender with a slim face, and had a professionally trim body. Not much about him made him stand out from the group of military-trained individuals, except for the way he held himself in an almost arrogant stance, with his hands behind his back and his chest puffed out. Toddley turned to look at the young face, and was surprised to actually meet a skeptic amongst the good men of the Avalon troop. "The real question is whether it's wise not to gain a better understanding of the unknown." "Sometimes the unknown would rather stay that way." The lieutenant watched as Toddley set up a small machine that scanned the creature with a subtle array to gain a full scan for modeling later on. "What's your name, Lieutenant?" Toddley asked with a smile while working on a scan. "Officer Ethereal Alrain," the young man stated as he looked back at his platoon that now spread out to secure the area. "Well, Alrain Ethereal, when you've gotten to my age, and you've seen as many worlds as I have, you'll come to know that the less you understand about the universe around you, the less grip you have on your own perspective of it. This is my love, my life, to discover and learn, and then to teach what I've learned." He finished his scan and packed away his machine. "Some of the greatest studies happen during wars and conflicts. Some would say people understand each other even better then," Alrain said as he pulled out his pistol from his belt and fired it into the air. The animals all jumped as the soldiers pulled their own weapons and stepped into an assault formation. The animals didn't run, but gazed around in wonder at the terrifying noise. Toddley stood and pulled the lieutenant's gun arm down to aim it towards the ground. "What do you think you're doing?" Alrain put his gun back into its holster, easing the group of trained fighters behind him to follow suit. "Now you know what I see, Professor. A primitive world that has yet to hunt or gain any real predator race that would teach terror and fear to small and quick creatures." Toddley stood aghast and stared at the man, eye to eye, trying to find some understanding that they could come to. Alrain's eyes showed no wavering or questioning at his own actions. He was completely confident in his choice. "That could be one explanation, yes. You could also consider, however, that they might be so submissive because they are protected from what predators this planet has created." "To be protected would require an intelligent race of overseers. In orbit, we didn't scan any civilizations," Alrain stated as he stepped forward to the swine-like creature and stuck out his hand to it. The animal was still, its eyes not wavering from its lock on the military man. The wind shifted at an unexpected rate and blew on their faces, causing them to cover their eyes from being dried. After a few seconds of intense wind, it stopped, and the air rested peacefully, allowing the men relief. Their eyes raised to find a figure towering over Alrain Ethereal, standing between him and the swine. The figure seemed monstrous at first inspection, with long dreadlock hair that could match the green-blue color of the forest around them, and skin as dark as the dirt beneath them. The soldiers pulled their weapons in surprise at first, but were put at ease by Toddley's raised hand. Toddley slowly pulled Allrine backwards from the still, silent figure as he stepped up to replace his position of inspection. He studied the hidden face, not to see one of rage or violence, but one of concern and protection for the swine animal that it covered with one extremely long hand and fingers. Toddley slowly raised his hands to show that he had no weapons. He then reached for his shoulder and tapped on the device that moved to cover one of his ears and a second arm that reached in front of his mouth. "I am peaceful, and we mean no harm to you or your home," Toddley said slowly and deliberately as the devices began to work with a small hum. The creature raised its large fingers and tapped the device on Toddley's head. It then began to whisper in deep tones that were at sometimes too low for him to hear. The machine whirred a bit more as it accepted the sounds coming from the creature. This is a translator, a device that we use to help learn and study languages so that we can communicate. So please, keep talking. It helps." The creature's arm lowered as it went back into silence. Toddley felt a bit lost, looking for a way to keep it speaking, and then he noticed the body of the creature showed it was covered in a tightly knitted cloth that wrapped around and showed an intricate design of lines and curves. He raised his hand slowly to tap on the creature's clothing. "Did you make this?" It began to speak again in the low tones, and it reached to its own chest and pulled at the cloth to give Toddley a better view at it. The machine began to work as it listened to the words, and the more they spoke, the more words it began to spit out in each language during their conversation, as a partial translation. The platoon settled in as the conversation continued, and Allrine joined the ranks of the men under his command. After a few hours of talking, the translation device was able to convert almost complete sentences between them. The creature looked up to see the squad of men begin to set up their tents and coverings that would house them for the oncoming night. It pointed towards the tents and began to speak a bit more towards Toddley, as if he was explaining something. The machine worked to translate as much as it could of the sentence for Toddley.
"Homes, for storm. More, I know."
"Homes? Your homes? You mean a city?" Toddley attempted to piece it together.
"City, my home. Way forest through I go."
Its translation spat into his ear. Yes, your city. May I go along with you?" Toddley asked as he raised his hand to his chest to indicate himself. The creature gestured in an unfamiliar fashion to Toddley and spoke a soft tone.
"Yes, follow,"
called out from the device. Toddley motioned to the group, and they all packed up and began to travel along with the two. Along the path, Allrine caught up in step with Toddley to express his concern. "Shouldn't we, at this point, follow the law of the constellations and not interact with the underdeveloped species?" Toddley turned and patted Allrine's shoulder with an affirming strength. "We're no longer within the jurisdiction of the court, my friend, and neither is Avalon Industries bound to the law when dealing with something as such as this. It's truly a first contact with another unknown intelligent life." He faced forward again and continued following the long striding steps of the large humanoid creature. The platoon trudged into the thick forestry, finding it thicker the further they traveled. The plants and greenery began to move with odd patterns, not following the same flow they danced to before. Now they moved in a commotion, like they were passing along whispers and rumors. Many of the men felt they could hear them speaking in those same deep tones as the creature that guided them. Toddley's machine turned back and forth, attempting to keep up with the many tones and noises that sounded amongst the forest. The piece at his ear spat out random words of translation convincing him of the men's spoken speculations of the living forestry. I may be grasping at random straws here, but are your people living flora? Toddley questioned to the lumbering giant. Dulcet tones came as a reply, echoing through the machine and becoming words.
They are me. I from them.
Its hand drooped low, and his fingers stiffened, facing his palm towards the ground. It then raised the same hand to its own height, and made the same motion.
Big, protect, small.
So, you're their guardian. Were you chosen because of your size? Does that mean your familial line has a specific role in your society? Toddley's curiosity was leaping from point to point, most of it being missed by the giant creature who simply turned its head and stared at the man while it walked. Smoke's familiar sting found Toddley's nose, pulling his attention ahead in the direction they were going. He looked to see if the flora creature had noticed it as well, but it only continued to step forward. I smell smoke. Is there fire somewhere? It took the machine a while to successfully garner a reaction from the beast. It leaned forward and bent its legs before bursting out in a sprint that caused a drafting wind that nearly pulled the platoon forward with it. Toddley allowed the wind to drag him, helping him to run forward after the creature. He felt the pounding of his aging legs with each running step along the path left behind. He fought off the burning that wanted to force him to stop, the repeated motion, and he was relieved when he came upon the clearing with the creature standing motionless. He took time to catch his breath before taking in the sight of the clearing with smoldering piles of what seemed to be old huts and plant-made corpses. Oh my. I'm so sorry. Toddley slowly stepped forward, ready to console his new acquaintance. Before he could make contact, the floral body flexed and leapt out of the area with an intense force that cracked the ground beneath it. The platoon entered the clearing with weapons spread to secure the area. It wasn't until seeing the men's reaction that he became conscious to the awful smell that permeated the area. Where did it go, Ranturn? Lieutenant Eterial questioned. I'm unsure, but something has... Under the tree, in the thickets. A wispy voice echoed into his mind. He looked to see if Eterial had heard the voice as well, but the man was only confused at the cut-off sentence. Did you say something? No, but you were saying that... The tree, largest in the woods, amid the water. The voice rose again, making Alrein's words trail off into the background. Toddley looked around the clearing to see if he could find the source of the voice. The sound returned with only one word. Forward. Toddley's curiosity drove him to follow the instructions, and he walked forward, studying everything he could look at, to find where this voice could be coming from. It was an unnatural sensation that felt not only like a voice speaking to his ears, but as if the words were pressing into his head. He's studied about the psychic potential of certain species within the constellations, but it was more of a shared impression or empathic abilities, and never before was there a full-on mind-to-mind connection. Before long he found his path halted by a large tree that had no bark, but shone as smooth as a large vine that protruded from the ground, with leaves that were larger than the entire length of the plant. Well, is this it? What do I do now? Toddley asked aloud to the tree-like thing before him. Alrein, Eterial, and the platoon walked up behind and began asking, Are you okay? What's going on? Toddley waited without answering until he heard the voice return and say, Down. The forest floor beneath him suddenly opened up and sucked him downward. He slid for a time before coming to a rolling stop onto a soft but wet surface. He felt the ache again of his age as he lifted himself upward. A world full of large plant life, and I listen to the first interesting voice I hear. Like a fly to a trap, you stupid old man, he spoke to himself.
Todley Ramturn,
the voice pronounced. He glanced around until he saw what looked like a humanoid face being engrossed by roots in a wall of the small cave he was now in, and the skin on its face seemed marked with the same intricate designs that adorned the large creature's clothes from before.
Are you the one speaking to me?
Todley tried to stand and walk forward, but bumping his head on the low roof taught him to walk in a bent position.
Yes, Mr. Todley, I have been. To your mind.
It spoke to him while emoting by flexing its face and eyes.
I noticed.
Who are you? He replied.
That's something I've lost to time. However, there is pertinent information that I must share with you. Knowledge that was given to me a long time ago, in a place further from your stars than you would ever know.
Allrine Eterial stood above the hole that had swallowed Todley, and studied it for a moment. One of his soldiers walked up and claimed, "Do we enact the soldier down?"
"I'll go in after him, set up a retrieval system, and be prepared to call for transport. This planet is becoming more dangerous than we are able to deal with,"
Eterial instructed before leaping down the hole. His sliding path weaved back and forth until he found himself skidding to a halt amongst a soft patch of wet material that made up the floor. He turned on a light orb that floated in front of him to brighten the space around him. He noticed a small pathway that led into darkness, and no signs of Todley ever being there. He decided to follow the path before him until he could find something that provided more clues to where the researcher had gone. The longer he walked, the more he noticed that the curvature of the cave seemed to lead him around in a circle. He gripped the floating light and tossed it forward, and watched as it flew around following the curve and then returned to him from behind.
There's an intelligence to this. The caves are shifting with a purpose.
He studied for a moment and then thought back on how Todley had been hearing something that drove him here.
I'm not facing nature. I'm facing something. A being who's somehow in control of all of this.
He stood himself in position and started to meditate his mind, carefully listening to his surroundings and thinking of the many possibilities. He heard a faint sound of talking, as if one person was communicating with a silent partner. He walked towards the sound and stuck his knife into the soft wall, and slowly cut down until there was enough space to see through. He witnessed the oddity of Todley speaking aloud to a face that protruded from the wall in front of him. Eterial studied the face in the wall to see if it was communicating in return, and after a moment of staring, he began to hear whisperings in his mind. Upon hearing its words, he could only connect that this was the voice of the mysterious face.
With these instructions, you must continue what's been done for centuries. But know that there are and always will be opposition. There are many that will fight against you, but you must find allies. It will never be achieved alone,
the voice pronounced. The face receded back into the wall, leaving Todley alone in the room to ponder on the things told to him. Eterial readied himself to finish cleaving through the wall until the voice returned to his mind and began to beckon him further into the hallway. He listened and followed the voice's direction, disappearing into the dark of the tunnels. Todley Ronturn gaped at the information he was given and thought about how crazy it all sounded to him. Time passed him by, nearly unnoticed, until a hand gripped his shoulder and pulled him back into reality. "Mr. Ronturn, we have to get out of here, right now!" Eteriel's face came into view, and then dragged him onto his feet. They crawled out of the hole to meet with the group of soldiers, now blasting their guns at dark, shadowy figures that darted back and forth, taking swipes at them. Looking up into the air, they noticed the large creature from before, soaring back and forth as if fighting some larger monster that required the extreme height of the leap. Neither of the men could see whatever it might have been, fighting in the darkness of the night sky. "Is this it? Will this be what the constellations will become, if I do as they asked?" Todley muttered as he awed at the many spectacles. "You're speaking nonsense. Let's get you to the infirmary. Private Kinley, call for an emergency shift," Eteriel called out. Just a moment later, the image of the platoon started to wave in the wind, as if they were a mirage in the desert, fading upon closer inspections. The area was left to its own usual wilds, until the creature slammed down into the ground, around the entrance to the tunnel. It moaned as water began to seep out from its plant-like muscles, and its body shrunk and shriveled, becoming one with the grass around it. Flowers of different colors started to spring up around it as it slowly died, and the echo of the large monster it had been fighting roared in triumph before crying as it was now trapped on this world, having finally killed the last of its long-sworn enemy.
And that was that.
Was it?
Yeah, mysterious, isn't it, huh?
It is really mysterious on how we just have like this 3-second pause and then keep on going with the podcast.
No. We listened to it along with the audience, right? We just read it right now, right here.
That's right.
Yeah.
I forgot.
We didn't just edit it in because I have a professional booth that makes it sound a lot better.
Why would we do that?
No, why would we do that?
It's ludicrous.
Hey, he's not a sponsor.
Curse you, Ludacris, for ruining a good word.
Hashtag not a sponsor. Hashtag not my word.
So, if you haven't noticed, we actually appeared to have skipped a portion of our podcast.
We're, in fact, changing the format just a little bit, giving you guys something to entice you for after the story to stick around. Now, this is the section of comments and questions.
So today we have another question for you, once again from our faithful listener, Ereline.
This question is, well, I guess the whole email is, "Hi guys, I have a question about Eternity Found. How many different races are in this world or universe? What are some of your favorites?"
So that is a really tough question to answer that first part on. This is a whole universe. And just like our universe, it is a universe that is constantly expanding. Not all of the depths of space have been traversed. So in answer to how many races there are,
it's numerous.
yeah, you can't count them.
Yeah. But to the question of what of some of our favorites, there's a few of note.
I have a favorite race.
What's that?
My favorite race is they are still in like medieval era time, and they've got 4 arms, and are extremely superstitious. And I don't know. Have you given them a name yet? That race?
I haven't yet. I'm still deliberating the name on that.
But this race has a reality TV show about them, where they send cameramen in disguise to film this base society, to film what's going on here and their courts and things.
So imagine how many people love and enjoy Game of Thrones right now. This is basically their Game of Thrones. This is not an acted, not a scripted, but a live medieval planet that they get to watch and enjoy. Some events may be scripted by the people causing them to happen, but the reactions of the people living there is natural.
Just completely natural. And during one of the stories, a couple of the characters end up on this planet, and they've got all the futuristic technology. They come to these people. The people are like, "Whoa, who are you?" And they're just like, "We're from the mountains." And so they respond, "I heard weird things come from the mountains." So that's probably my favorite race. I enjoy them. I like to think about them. I sort of imagine them almost rock-like.
Mm-hmm.
They're not very smooth-skinned.
Yeah.
Just I think they're fun.
Yeah, I always felt their nature was their skin was a deep blue tone in nature with a rough, ragged feel to it, more like a stone. And they're like in part of the story, some of the characters will walk up to guards standing by a door, and they just look like statues just standing there and just like,
hello.
Hey.
Hello, British soldier.
Yeah, basically. Some of my favorite races, I've got so many in my head that I could pull out and just talk about, but the one, I think we talked about it once before, is a Space Cthulhu.
Yeah, Space Cthulhu is the best.
There's a character in there that's introduced later on in the story.
Not actually an elder god. Not actually created by Lovecraft.
They're not Cthulhu. They're just a squid-like race that has electricity powers with tentacles and things like that. But they're a lot of fun. They're green skin. They've got tentacle-like things. They're more skeletal in nature that come out of their back and can kind of form wings, but they don't fly with them. They generate electricity, and they can use EMP blasts and things like that. But it's a fun race. I've enjoyed writing about them. I do have some stories about them already written up.
And a very notable character from that race as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a great question, Arlene, and we'll definitely expand it. If you have some ideas that you want to throw out there, maybe, say like, what if there was a race that was based off of this or this? We can expand on it. We can create those.
By all means.
Yeah, just let us know. And any of you guys out there who want to add in your own comments and questions, send them to StoryboardPod@gmail.com.
That's StoryboardPod@gmail.com. Once again, StoryboardPod@gmail.com.
StoryboardPod@gmail.com. One more time, I guess that was it.
Yeah. We would love to hear from you. We would love to read your questions and answer them and get your ideas and do some brainstorming with you. Mm-hmm. If you want us to, we could even create a race on air. Yeah. Just the two of us talking, spurred by your ideas.
Yeah, we could dedicate an episode to fully developing something for you guys that you would like to see happen. We don't have to do a story. We could still do a story, but we could do it where we just sit there and we go delve into ideas and develop certain things. We could also do it where we're kind of thinking in the future of doing episodes where we have you guys be able to submit stories of your own creation. If you want to advertise it or have a portion of it read by one of us, we can do that for you.
Send it on in.
And we can have an episode dedicated to that. A mini-sode or something like that.
So, we love you guys. You're a great community. Write in those questions.
And we'll see you guys next time when Castaways returns.
Yes, we will. We're going to be talking about Judd.
Ooh, Judd. Dun, dun, dun.
And his creepy ship.
Very creepy. All right. See you guys next time. Have a good one.
Bye.